She didn't know the cold statue was the sleeping vampire king waiting for her touch. Mist hung low over the village as Elira walked along the winding path that led to the old castle. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, their faces pale whenever the castle's name was mentioned. They called it the place of the cold statue, a frozen figure that none dared to touch. Some whispered that it drained the warmth from the air, that anyone who approached it too closely would never be the same again. But Elira was not like the villagers. She was not afraid of stories, nor of shadows that danced beneath the moonlight. Since childhood, she had felt a pull toward the castle, as though some unseen thread tied her to its broken towers and crumbling walls. Tonight, that pull had become irresistible. The gates of the castle loomed ahead, their iron twisted with rust and age. A thin layer of frost shimmered on the edges, catching the pale light of the full moon. Elira pushed them open with a creak that echoed across the silent courtyard. The wind seemed to sigh through the cracks of the castle walls, carrying the faint scent of roses long dead and earth turned cold. She stepped cautiously inside, her boots clicking softly on the stone floor. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, and a shiver ran down her spine. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders but pressed onward, her curiosity stronger than any fear. The castle was vast and silent. Grand halls stretched into shadow, their ceilings high and adorned with faded tapestries. Statues of knights and kings stood frozen in stone, their eyes seeming to follow her with silent judgment. Yet it was one figure that drew her above all else, a statue unlike any other, set alone in the heart of the main hall. The figure was tall, regal, and impossibly lifelike. Even from a distance, Elira could see the sharp lines of a noble face, the curve of strong shoulders, and hands that seemed ready to move rather than remain still. His eyes, though carved in stone, held a depth that made her heart ache. The villagers' tales had never hinted at anything so beautiful. Elira stepped closer, her breath catching as she reached out. Her fingertips brushed the cold stone. The moment her skin met his, a tremor ran through her body. It was as if the castle itself had exhaled, as if the silence had suddenly grown heavy and alive. A sudden warmth sparked under her fingers, a pulse that contradicted the cold she had expected. Her hand froze. Something deep in her chest stirred, a memory, a whisper, a longing she could not name. The figure before her seemed to shift, almost imperceptibly, like the first crack of ice before a spring thaw. Then, with a sound like the softest sigh, his eyes opened. They were red, deep, endless, and mesmerizing. Elira stumbled back, her heart racing. She had expected a statue, cold and unmoving, yet here was life, terrifying and magnetic all at once. His gaze held her, unblinking, measuring her, and something about it felt as though he had been waiting for her for centuries. "You." His voice was smooth, low, and echoing, carrying both command and weariness. "I have been waiting for you." Elira's lips parted in disbelief. I did." She could not find words. The figure stepped forward, and Elira felt the temperature drop further around her, yet she noticed a strange contrast. The air near him held a strange warmth that seemed to tether her to the ground. She could feel her heartbeat echoing through the hall. "My name is Kale," he said, his voice both gentle and firm. "You have awakened me." Elira's hand instinctively went to her chest, feeling the rapid drum of her heart. "Awakened you? I touched the statue. I didn't mean." Kale's expression softened slightly, though the red of his eyes did not dim. "Your touch was meant. I have waited long enough, longer than you can imagine." She took a step back, glancing around the hall as though the castle itself might respond. Shadows flickered along the walls and the moonlight seemed to bend around him, highlighting the sharp elegance of his features. Something about him was ancient, regal, and terribly lonely. I don't understand," Elira whispered. Who are you?" Kale tilted his head, studying her with a strange intensity. "I am the king of what remains, a ruler cursed by those who feared me. I have slept while the world changed, while centuries passed, And yet you have found me." Elira felt a shiver, not entirely of cold. There was sorrow in his eyes, a weight she could not place, and yet there was something compelling, almost magnetic, that drew her closer despite her fear. Why me?" she asked, voice trembling. "Why am I here?" Cale's gaze softened, and for a moment the red of his eyes seemed to shimmer into something warmer, more human. "Because the touch that awakens is the touch that chooses, and the one who awakens me is never by accident." Elira's mind raced. She had always felt a connection to this place, a sense of belonging she could never explain. Now it made sense, terrifying, wondrous sense. She stepped closer, curiosity stronger than fear, and looked into his eyes. What happens now?" Cale extended a hand toward her, delicate yet commanding. "Now, you learn the truth of what I am, of what this castle holds. You will see the shadows that linger and the past that haunts me. And you will decide if you are willing to face what comes with knowing me." Elira hesitated, feeling the weight of his words pressing on her. The castle seemed to lean in closer, the silence thick with expectation. She knew instinctively that nothing in her life had prepared her for this moment, and yet some small, brave part of her stirred. I want to know," she said softly, her fingers brushing against his once more. The moment she touched him again, a warmth spread through her, stronger than before, as though the pulse of centuries had begun to flow into her veins. Cale's eyes darkened with emotion, a mixture of longing and caution. "Be warned," he said. "The path you have chosen is not gentle. It carries shadows, power, and secrets that have no mercy. Yet I feel that you are ready." The wind rose suddenly, rattling the windows, and shadows shifted along the walls. For a heartbeat, the castle seemed to breathe, alive with magic and ancient intent. Elira could feel it in her bones, the weight of what had been sleeping and what was now awakening. I think I can face it," Elira whispered, almost to herself. "I think I want to." Cale's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, and he reached toward her again. "Then take my hand and do not let fear guide you, for once the touch is given, there is no turning back. The world you knew is gone. The one you step into now belongs to the forgotten, to the cursed, and to those who wait in shadow." Elira took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of his hand and the cold of the air around them. She placed her hand in his. In that instant, the hall seemed to glow with faint, flickering light, as though the castle itself recognized the bond being formed. And in the deep silence that followed, a distant sound echoed through the stone corridors, a faint whisper, like a warning carried on the wind. Yet Elira felt no fear, only the undeniable, pulsing awareness that something ancient, powerful, and infinite had begun to stir. Cale's gaze met hers, unwavering. "The journey begins," he said, voice both a promise and a challenge. Elira swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She did not know what lay ahead, nor what the castle held. But as she stood there, hand in hand with the being who had waited centuries for her, she felt the first spark of something extraordinary, a mixture of awe, fear, and something she could not yet name. Outside, the moon shone bright, casting a silver glow over the castle's towers. Within, centuries of silence had finally ended, and Elira, unaware of the full weight of the moment, had touched a life that had waited far too long to awaken. The cold statue had never truly been stone. It had been waiting for her. And in that moment, the castle seemed to hold its breath, as if the world itself awaited the choice she would make, and the consequences that would follow. The castle seemed to breathe as Elira followed Cale through the dim halls. Every step she took echoed against stone walls that had not felt footsteps for centuries. Shadows stretched like fingers across the floor, moving as if alive, yet she felt no fear, not with Cale near. His presence was commanding, yet strangely gentle, like the pull of the tide or the warmth of sunlight breaking through a storm. "Where are we going?" Elira asked, her voice small in the vastness of the hall. "To the heart of the castle," Cale replied, his gaze scanning the walls as if reading them. There you will understand what has been hidden, what has been waiting, and why you were drawn here." Elira nodded, though a swirl of questions pressed at her mind. She wanted to ask him how he had survived so long, how he had come to be frozen in stone, but the words seemed too fragile to carry the weight of what she sensed in him. Instead, she let him guide her, letting her curiosity and instinct lead. The hall opened into a grand chamber, larger than any room she had ever seen. Broken chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their crystals catching the moonlight in fragments that danced like stars. Dust and frost covered the floor, but the space held a strange vibrancy, as though the castle itself had remembered life, even in its long slumber. At the center of the chamber stood a throne carved from black marble, veins of silver running through it like frozen lightning. Kale gestured toward it, but he did not sit. Instead, he turned to Elira, his eyes deep pools of red that reflected the silver light. "This throne," he began, "was mine centuries ago. I ruled a kingdom of vast lands and loyal people. But power, as you will learn, carries shadows as well as light." Elira took a cautious step closer. "Shadows?" Kale's gaze darkened, and for a moment the regal mask slipped, revealing something raw beneath, a mixture of sorrow, rage, and endless loneliness. "Yes. Shadows of betrayal, of envy, of magic used to punish rather than protect. I was cursed to this stone prison by those who feared me, and yet I was not meant to remain silent forever." He moved toward her, and Elira noticed the grace in each step. Despite his strength, there was a careful elegance in the way he carried himself. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost a whisper. "You awakened me. That was never meant to happen. The curse should have kept me bound until the world forgot my name. But you," he hesitated, studying her as though trying to read the rhythm of her heart. "You are different. You carry a light I have not seen in centuries, and for that I am both grateful and wary." Elira's heart ached for him, for the weight of centuries pressing on a single soul. I didn't mean to wake you," she said. I felt drawn here like I was supposed to be." Kale's red eyes softened, a faint glow of warmth threading through their depth. "Then you were meant to be. Fate has a way of choosing those who are brave enough to touch the frozen." Elira glanced around the chamber, her eyes catching glimpses of paintings covered in dust and cobwebs. They depicted kings and queens, warriors and battles, but one figure appeared again and again, a man with piercing eyes and a commanding presence. Her gaze returned to Kale, realizing that the figure in the paintings was him. His image, immortalized in art, had survived centuries while he slept. "Your kingdom, it was real?" she asked. Kale's jaw tightened and a shadow of grief crossed his face. "Real and lost. Treasures and cities destroyed, allies turned into enemies, love stolen from my grasp. I have lived in memory and shadow, trapped in stone until the hand of destiny brought you." Elira's fingers itched to touch him again, to feel the pulse of life under his skin, but she restrained herself. She sensed the intensity of his power, like a current that could sweep her away if she were careless. "Can you tell me, what curse kept you?" she asked. Kale inhaled slowly, as if preparing to carry the weight of centuries in words. "A sorcerer, envious of my rule and fearful of my strength, cursed me to sleep in this form. Stone to the world, yet alive in all ways that matter. The curse was not merely a prison of the body. It was a prison of the heart, the mind, and the soul. I was to remain cold, unmoving, until none remembered me, until my kingdom was forgotten." Elira's eyes widened. "And yet you are here, awake now." "Yes," Kale said, stepping closer, the shadows moving with him as if acknowledging his return. "And your touch awakened more than my body. It stirred memories, desires, and the faintest hope that I might reclaim some part of what was lost." The room seemed to pulse with energy, the air thick with magic and longing. Elira felt a mixture of awe and fear, realizing that she had entered a world far older and more dangerous than anything she had known. Yet despite the danger, there was a pull she could not resist, a desire to understand, to be near him, to touch the life that had waited so long to awaken. Kale extended his hand toward her. "Come closer. Let me show you what lies hidden in these halls, in this castle, and in the heart of one who has waited centuries for a single touch." Elira hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The moment their skin met, a current of warmth and power flowed through her, stronger than before. She gasped, feeling as if the pulse of centuries had joined with her own heartbeat. "You feel it," Kale said, his voice low, almost reverent. "The life that stirs beneath the curse, the magic that binds this place, the shadows that linger. You have awakened not just me, but the castle itself." The walls trembled slightly, dust falling from the ceilings, and Elira felt a thrill of fear. What do you mean?" Kale's eyes held hers, unwavering. "Magic does not sleep forever. It waits, it watches, and it responds to those who dare touch it. The castle, these halls, even the shadows, they have waited for centuries for the right hand to awaken them. That hand is yours." Elira's breath caught. "Mine? Yes," Kale replied. "And now that you have awakened me, the choices you make will shape more than your destiny. They will shape mine, and perhaps the fate of the world I once ruled." The weight of his words pressed down on her, but she did not step back. Somehow, in the midst of fear and wonder, she knew she was ready to face what lay ahead. Kale guided her deeper into the castle, through corridors lined with statues of warriors and kings who had long since fallen into dust. Each statue seemed to watch them, silent witnesses to the moment the vampire king returned to life. They entered a smaller chamber, lined with mirrors that reflected moonlight in fractured patterns. Elira saw herself in them, standing beside Kale, and felt a strange connection, as if her life had been leading to this encounter all along. "You may feel fear," Kale said softly. "You may feel wonder, but remember, the path you have chosen carries shadows and light. It is not a path for the faint of heart. You must trust yourself and trust me." Elira nodded, determination settling in her chest. I will try." Kale studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand once more. "Then let us begin. There is much for you to see, much to learn, and much that waits in the dark. The frozen heart is not just a curse. It is a challenge, a test of courage and trust, and you have passed the first." The castle seemed to shiver around them, shadows twisting and moving as if alive. A distant sound echoed, a whisper of wind, or perhaps the stirrings of magic long dormant. Elira's pulse quickened, but she held Kale's gaze, finding strength in the red depth of his eyes, in the warmth of his touch, in the quiet promise of something extraordinary. And then, from somewhere deep within the castle, a soft, chilling voice carried on the wind. "She is here," it whispered, "and the time has come." Elira looked at Kale, but he did not flinch. His hand tightened around hers, his presence a shield against the unknown. "Do not fear," he said. "The shadows may stir, the past may call, but we will face it together. You have awakened me, and now nothing will ever be the same." Outside, the moon shone brighter, casting silver light across the castle towers. Within, centuries of silence had broken, and the frozen heart had begun to beat once more. Elira did not yet know what dangers lay ahead, nor the full depth of the vampire king's power. But she felt the undeniable pull of destiny, of magic, of connection. And she knew that whatever came next, she was ready to step into the shadows with him. The frozen heart had been awakened, and the first spark of a bond, eternal and dangerous, had been lit. The castle had settled into an uneasy silence after Elira's first night with Kale. Moonlight streamed through shattered windows, casting fragmented shadows across the stone floors. Elira moved carefully behind him, each step stirring the faint scent of roses and old earth that seemed to linger wherever he walked. Kale had led her to the inner chambers, rooms filled with relics and remnants of a world long lost. Paintings hung crookedly on the walls, depicting kings, queens, and warriors whose gazes seemed almost alive, tracking their movements as though judging their every decision. In the center of one room stood a large mirror framed in black marble. Its surface was flawless, though thick with dust. Kale motioned for her to look. "This mirror shows more than appearances," he said softly. "It reflects truths that lie beneath the surface, truths you may not be ready to face." Elira stepped closer, her fingers hovering above the glass. When her reflection appeared, she froze for a moment. But as she stared, the mirror shifted, revealing not just her own image but fragments of Kale's past, a kingdom in flames, a woman screaming in despair, soldiers falling to unseen foes, and a throne blackened with shadow. Kale's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "This is the life I lived before the curse. Glory, love, betrayal, all stolen from me. And now, centuries later, it is not only my past that awaits, it is our future." Elira's heart ached for him. You suffered so much alone." "Yes," Kale admitted, his gaze darkening. "Alone, except for memories that never left me and the curse that kept me from warmth, from love, from life itself. Until now." His red eyes softened as they met hers. "Until you touched me." Elira swallowed hard. Her hand instinctively reached for his, but she hesitated. She was drawn to him, yes, but the depth of his pain was frightening. I don't know if I can help you," she whispered. "I'm just one person. How can I fix something that has lasted hundreds of years?" Kale's hand found hers, firm yet gentle. "You cannot fix what has been broken. Not entirely. But you can awaken what remains. You can remind me of the light I thought was lost forever. You can stand with me, not to erase the past, but to shape the future." Elira nodded slowly, feeling a surge of courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Then I will stay. I want to understand. I want to help you." Kale's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though the shadow in his eyes remained. "The curse is not only my burden. It is dangerous. It will test you, Elira. It will tempt you, frighten you, and even threaten to undo the connection we have begun to forge. And yet, if you are willing, it will also reveal who you truly are." They left the chamber, moving deeper into the castle. The walls seemed to close around them, shadows growing darker, moving with a life of their own. Elira's heart beat faster, sensing the magic that pulsed through the castle like an invisible river. She knew instinctively that Kale's awakening had stirred forces far older than either of them. "The curse was never just a spell," Kale explained as they walked through a corridor lined with statues. "It was a design, a trap of envy and fear. The sorcerer who cursed me wanted not only to bind me but to punish any who might awaken me. That is why the castle has remained silent for centuries. It waits, as I did, for the one who dares to touch the frozen." Elira glanced at the statues, some of which seemed to twitch slightly under the moonlight. "And are there others? Spirits, guardians, creatures?" Kale nodded. "Yes, shadows linger. Some are remnants of the sorcerer's magic, twisted and angry. Others are echoes of my kingdom, loyal yet bound to the curse. All will test you. All will seek to uncover the truth of your heart and whether it is strong enough to stand beside me." Elira felt a chill, but she did not step back. Instead, she held Kale's gaze, finding strength in his presence. "I will face them," she said quietly. "I want to stand with you." Kale's eyes softened, but the red glow deepened, a warning that danger was near. "Then you must trust not only me but yourself. The curse will not be merciful. It will show your fears, your doubts, even your desires, and you must confront them or be lost to the shadows forever." They entered a vast hall filled with towering pillars. The floor was cracked and faint light from the moon shimmered across the uneven stone. In the center of the room floated a dark mist, swirling as if alive. Elira's stomach tightened. She could feel the energy radiating from it, powerful, ancient, and restless. "This is the first test," Kale said, his voice low and steady. "The shadows of the sorcerer linger here. They seek to intimidate, to divide, and to consume. You must step forward and face them." Elira took a deep breath and nodded. Her hand found Kale's, and she felt the warmth of his life anchoring her courage. Together, they stepped into the mist. Immediately, the shadows shifted, forming vague shapes, faces twisted in anger, figures reaching out with ghostly hands. Elira's heart raced, but she forced herself to stand tall. The shadows whispered doubts, fears, and regrets, echoing her deepest insecurities. "You cannot protect him," one hissed. "You are weak. You will fail." Elira's eyes narrowed. She clenched her fists and focused on Kale's hand in hers, feeling the strength that coursed through him. "I will not let you control me," she said firmly. "I will stand." Kale's voice resonated in her mind, calm and commanding. "Good. Do not fight with anger. Fight with courage, with truth. The shadows feed on fear." Elira closed her eyes, centering herself. When she opened them, the shadows recoiled slightly, as if sensing her resolve. Step by step, she moved forward, her hand in Kale's, facing the whispers that sought to weaken her. The mist thickened, shapes forming into more defined forms, creatures that seemed almost human, twisted and deformed by centuries of magic. Elira could hear their murmurs, their threats, but she did not falter. She remembered Kale's words. Courage and truth were her weapons. "Do not fear," she whispered to herself. "I am stronger than you." Kale's presence beside her was steady, a beacon in the swirling darkness. He did not fight the shadows, he allowed her to do so, guiding her courage silently. And slowly the shapes began to dissipate, dissolving into nothingness as Elira's strength grew. Finally, the mist cleared, leaving only the cold stone floor beneath their feet. Elira's chest heaved with exertion, but a sense of triumph filled her. She had faced the first test, and though the shadows had sought to intimidate her, she had not faltered. Kale turned to her, his expression unreadable, yet a faint smile touched his lips. "You have done well. Many who awaken the frozen heart falter here. Few survive the first trial." Elira let out a shaky laugh, relief mingling with awe. I did it." Kale's red eyes softened, glowing with warmth. "Yes, and now you see that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to face it. The curse will continue to test us, but together, we may yet endure it." They left the hall, moving toward the higher towers of the castle. Elira noticed the faint glimmers of magic in the walls, threads of light that pulsed and shimmered as if alive. Kale paused at the top of a spiral staircase, looking down at her. "Elira, there is more you must know," he said, his voice heavy with seriousness. "The curse is not finished. Shadows remain, more dangerous than those you have faced. And there is a truth about me that I have not yet shared, one that may change everything you think you know." Elira's heart tightened, a mixture of anticipation and dread. "What is it?" Kale took a deep breath, his gaze distant as if recalling a memory too painful to speak aloud. "I am not only bound by the curse. I am bound by a hunger, a power, and a past that has shaped me into what I am. You will see it soon. You must be ready to face it and to decide if you are willing to stay with me despite it." Elira met his gaze steadily. "I want to stay. I want to understand. Whatever comes, I will face it with you." Kale's eyes softened again, and for a moment the red glow faded into a warm, almost human depth. "Then we move forward, together." As they ascended the staircase, the castle seemed to shift around them, the shadows growing longer, the air thick with ancient power. And somewhere deep within the walls, a pulse of energy stirred, sensing the bond forming between the vampire king and the girl who had dared to touch him. The frozen heart had begun to thaw, but the curse was far from broken. And the tests that lay ahead would challenge them in ways neither could yet imagine. The castle's corridors seemed endless, a labyrinth of shadow and stone. Elira followed Kale as he led her to the highest tower, the air thick with a mixture of frost and magic. The moonlight spilled through broken windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced like tiny stars around them. "This tower holds the history of my kingdom," Kale said softly, his red eyes glowing in the dim light. "And it is here you will understand why the curse was never meant to be simple, why it binds me still, and why you—" he paused, his gaze meeting hers, "why you were drawn here." Elira felt a shiver of anticipation. She had already faced the first test, the shadows of the castle and the remnants of the sorcerer's magic, but she sensed that this tower held something far deeper, far more personal. They entered a chamber at the top, circular and vast, with walls lined by bookshelves that stretched high into the darkness. Ancient tomes and scrolls were stacked haphazardly, some toppled and broken, others preserved by magic. In the center of the room, a large mirror lay on the floor, tilted slightly as if waiting to reveal truths that were both dangerous and necessary. Kale moved to it, placing a hand upon the surface. The glass shimmered, and the room seemed to tilt around them. Shadows swirled within the mirror, forming visions that flickered between the past and the present. "This mirror shows what is hidden, what is denied," Kale explained. "It will reveal not only the truth of my past but the weight of the curse, the lives lost, and the choices I could not undo. You must see it, Elira. You must understand me fully if you are to stand beside me." Elira stepped closer, her hand brushing his. I am ready," she said, though a tremor ran through her. The mirror flared with light and images began to form. Elira saw Kale, centuries younger, standing in a grand hall filled with people who looked to him with devotion. His face was proud, commanding, yet there was a softness in his eyes reserved for one woman, beautiful, kind, with a smile that seemed to warm even the coldest stone. Then the vision shifted. Flames engulfed the hall and screams filled the air. The woman ran, reaching for Kale, but shadows overtook her, dragging her into darkness. Kale reached out, his voice desperate, but he could not save her. Soldiers fell, allies betrayed him, and the kingdom crumbled. Elira gasped, gripping his arm. You loved her." Kale's eyes, glowing red, seemed to darken with pain. "Yes, and I lost her. The curse was designed not only to bind me but to remind me of that loss, to keep me trapped in grief and longing." Elira felt a lump in her throat. "And now you are awake. Can you ever forgive yourself?" Kale shook his head slowly. "I have carried centuries of regret, and yet the moment you touched me something shifted. Perhaps it is hope, perhaps it is fate, or perhaps it is you, but I feel lighter even if the shadows are still near." Elira's hand found his, holding it tightly. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," she whispered. "We can face it together." Kale looked at her, his expression a mixture of awe and something more vulnerable, a hint of humanity that had been buried under centuries of stone. "You are brave," he said quietly, "braver than any who have stood before me, and for that I owe you more than I can ever repay." A sudden movement in the shadows drew their attention. Figures began to materialize along the edges of the chamber, echoes of the curse Kale had carried. They were not fully human, not fully shadow, but something in between, creatures born of magic, sorrow, and time. Their eyes glowed faintly, watching, waiting. "The curse is testing you again," Kale said, his grip on her hand tightening. "These are guardians of the sorcerer's spell. They seek to distract, to intimidate, and to see if your resolve is true." Elira felt fear rise, but she refused to let it control her. "Then I will not let them succeed," she said firmly. The figures advanced, but Elira stood her ground. She remembered Kale's guidance. Courage and truth, not fear, were her weapons. She focused on the warmth of his hand, the certainty in his gaze, and the bond they had begun to forge. Slowly, the shadows recoiled, uncertain in the presence of their defiance. Kale moved beside her, his voice low and steady. "Do not fight them with anger. Fight them with what you are, with the strength of your heart. That is more powerful than any spell." Elira nodded, drawing a deep breath. "I am not afraid," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I will not be afraid." The shadows twisted, forming images of her own fears, loneliness, failure, loss, but she faced each one, refusing to look away. Step by step, she moved forward, holding Kale's hand, their bond protecting them both. Finally, the last shadow dissolved, leaving the chamber bathed in the silver glow of moonlight. Elira's chest heaved with exertion, but a sense of triumph filled her. She had faced the second trial, and though the castle's magic was still alive, she had proven that her courage was real. Kale's eyes softened, and for the first time, Elira saw a faint glimmer of warmth behind the red glow. "You have done well," he said. "Many who awaken the frozen heart falter here. Few remain unbroken." Elira smiled weakly. "Then I am glad I did not falter." Kale's gaze lingered on her, filled with admiration and something deeper, a connection that neither time nor curse could erase. "The bond between us grows stronger," he said softly. "It is not just the curse that awakens, it is the possibility of redemption, of life reclaimed, of hearts finding each other despite centuries of shadow." Elira felt her heart swell with hope and fear at the same time. "Redemption," she repeated. "Do you really believe we can find it?" Kale's eyes met hers, unwavering. "I do, but it will not be simple. The curse still holds power, and forces beyond this castle are stirring. We must be prepared for what comes next." Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the tower, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to come from deep within the walls. Elira felt it in her bones, a warning that something was approaching. "What is that?" she asked, clutching Kale's arm. Kale's expression darkened. "It is something older than even I am. The curse has awakened more than me. It has stirred what waits in shadow, and it is moving toward us." Elira swallowed hard, but she did not pull away. "Then we face it together," she said firmly. Kale nodded, his grip tightening. "Yes." Together. The castle seemed to respond, the shadows growing longer, the air thickening with ancient magic. The bond between Kale and Elira pulsed, visible to the castle itself, as if their courage and trust could shape the very walls around them. They moved toward the center of the tower, where a spiral staircase led to a hidden chamber known only to Kale. As they descended, the air grew colder, heavier, and the shadows seemed to twist and writhe like living things. "This chamber," Kale explained, "holds the remnants of the sorcerer's magic. It is here that the final trials await. You must be prepared for illusions, for temptations, and for the truths that may frighten you more than any shadow ever could." Elira nodded, her resolve firm. "I am ready." Kale studied her for a moment, then placed a hand on her cheek, the warmth of his touch contrasting with the cold stone around them. "Your courage is rare," he said softly, "and it will be the key to surviving what comes next. Remember, Elira, you awaken more than me. You awaken the possibility of light where only shadow has existed for centuries." A sudden rumble shook the tower, and dust fell from the ceilings. The air shimmered, charged with magic and anticipation. Elira felt the pull of something ancient, powerful, and watching. "The final trial is near," Kale said, his voice steady despite the tremors. "And when it comes, you must trust yourself and trust me, for once it begins, there is no turning back." Elira looked into his eyes, seeing centuries of pain and longing, but also hope and trust. "I will trust you," she whispered, "no matter what comes." Kale's lips curved into a faint, solemn smile. "Then let us move forward and face the shadows together. The castle has waited long enough for its frozen heart to thaw, and we will see if its secrets will grant redemption, or if the past will claim us before the dawn." As they reached the hidden chamber, the shadows shifted, coiling and twisting with a life of their own. Elira felt the weight of centuries pressing down, but she held Kale's hand tightly, their bond a shield against the unknown. The castle was alive now, responding to the courage of those who dared to awaken it. And deep within the darkness, an ancient presence stirred, watching, waiting, and preparing for the moment it would confront the vampire king and the girl who had dared to touch him. The frozen heart had begun to thaw. But the curse had one final challenge remaining. The hidden chamber pulsed with ancient magic. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls, stretching like living fingers, yet Elira did not falter. She stood beside Kale, her hand tightly in his, feeling the warmth that anchored her courage. The air was heavy with anticipation, and the low rumble of a presence older than time itself vibrated through the stone. Kale's red eyes glowed brighter, reflecting both determination and warning. Elira, whatever comes, remember your strength, trust yourself, and trust me. This is the final trial. The curse, the shadows, the sorcerer's remnants, they will test us fully. Only together can we survive. Elira nodded, her heart steady despite the fear. I'm ready, she whispered. We face it together. The shadows coalesced, forming a massive figure that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes, though unseen, radiated power and malice, and a voice like rolling thunder spoke through the chamber. The frozen heart has been disturbed. The vampire king awakens. The bond must be tested. Only one shall remain. Elira's fingers tightened around Kale's. We will not fail, she said, summoning every ounce of courage she possessed. Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding. You may be ancient and you may be powerful, he said, his voice echoing. But together we are stronger than your shadows, stronger than your fear. Stand aside or be undone. The shadow figure surged toward them and the room shook. Elira could feel its intent, malice, hunger, and centuries of suppressed rage, but she did not retreat. Instead, she focused on Kale's hand, on the bond that had been forming since the moment she first touched him. You awaken more than me, Kale murmured to her. You awaken hope where only shadow has existed. Elira felt a spark of courage ignite within her. She raised her head and stared into the darkness, refusing to let fear control her. The shadows lunged, but their forms wavered as her resolve strengthened. Kale's power surged in response, red light illuminating the chamber and pushing back the darkness. The figure roared, an unearthly sound that shook the walls, but Elira stood firm. She realized that her touch, the same one that had awakened Kale, was now a conduit of strength, a bridge between light and shadow. She reached toward the figure, her hand outstretched. You will not control me, she said clearly. We choose life. We choose each other. Kale stepped beside her, extending his other hand, and together their hands glowed with warmth and power. The shadows writhed violently but could not break through. The bond between them pulsed like a heartbeat, pure and strong, and the figure shrieked, dissolving into the swirling mist that had once held it together. For a moment, silence fell over the chamber. Dust settled, shadows calmed, and the castle seemed to exhale as if releasing centuries of tension. Elira looked at Kale and he looked back at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You did it, Kale said softly. You were brave. Stronger than any curse, stronger than any shadow. Together we have reclaimed what was lost. Elira smiled, relief flooding her. We did it together. Kale stepped closer, his eyes glowing softly now, the red hue dimming into something almost human, almost tender. There is something else you must understand, he said, his voice low, intimate. The curse has not just tested me, it has tested us. And now that it is broken, the power that binds this castle can finally be used to heal what has been wounded for centuries. Elira felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of peace she had never known. So, the castle itself can be restored. Kale nodded, his gaze fixed on her. Yes, but more importantly, we can restore what was broken within us. Redemption is not just about undoing the past, it is about embracing the future. He extended his hand toward her, not as a guide or protector, but as a partner, equal and connected. Elira took it without hesitation, and a brilliant light enveloped them, flowing outward to every corner of the castle. Shadows dissolved, broken statues shimmered into life once more, and the air seemed to hum with magic and renewal. Elira looked around in awe. The castle, which had been cold and lifeless for centuries, was alive again. Faint greenery crept along the stone walls, roses bloomed where dust had settled, and the air was filled with a sense of possibility and hope. Kale's eyes met hers, softer than they had ever been. You have awakened more than me, Elira. You have awakened life, love, and light where only shadows existed, and for that I am forever yours. Elira's heart swelled. And I choose you, not because of who you were or who you are, but because of who we are together. Kale smiled, a true, warm smile that erased centuries of sorrow. He gently took her face in his hands. Then let this moment mark the beginning of what we will build together. The frozen heart is no longer mine alone. It belongs to us, our courage, our trust, our bond. The moonlight poured through the windows, illuminating their faces. For the first time, Elira felt completely safe, completely understood, and completely connected to the being who had waited centuries for her touch. "You have changed me," Kale whispered. "Not just freed me from the curse, but reminded me that even in darkness, light can survive." Elira's fingers brushed his cheek, her touch gentle yet certain. "And you have changed me too. I came here curious, searching, and now I know that courage and love are stronger than any shadow." The castle seemed to hum with their shared energy, and for a moment, centuries of history and sorrow felt lifted, as if time itself acknowledged their triumph. Outside, the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon, painting the sky with soft pinks and golds. Kale extended his hand once more. "Come," he said, his voice calm and strong. "Let us see the dawn together for the first time in centuries." Elira took his hand, and together they walked to the highest tower. The wind played in her hair, carrying the scent of blooming roses and fresh stone. They watched as the sun rose, spilling light across the castle and the lands beyond. The shadows of the past no longer threatened them. They had faced the curse, the trials, and the ancient darkness, and emerged stronger, united, and renewed. Elira leaned into Kale, resting her head against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and real, no longer bound by stone or sorrow. "It feels like a new beginning," she whispered. Kale kissed the top of her head gently. "It is. A beginning born of trust, courage, and the eternal bond we share. And though the world beyond may still hold dangers, we will face them together, as equals, as partners, as something stronger than either of us alone." For a long while they remained there, watching the dawn, letting the peace of the moment wash over them. The castle, alive and restored, reflected their triumph. The frozen heart had been awakened, freed, and transformed, not just into life, but into hope, courage, and enduring love. Then Kale spoke again, his voice soft but certain. "Elira, you came to me when I was trapped in stone, in grief, in shadows. You reminded me that even the darkest heart can be touched, can be healed, can be redeemed. You are the light I have waited for." Elira smiled, lifting her face to meet his. "And you are the strength I never knew I needed. Together, we have changed what was thought impossible. Together, we are unstoppable." Kale pulled her close, their hands entwined, their hearts beating in perfect rhythm. "Then let us walk forward into this new day and every day that follows. No curse, no shadow, no darkness can ever separate us now." Elira rested against him, the first rays of sunlight warming her face, the castle alive with life around them. The long night of sorrow and shadow was over. The trials had been faced, the curses defeated, and the frozen heart fully awakened, not just in Kale but in both of them. And as the sun rose higher, spilling light across the towers and valleys, Elira and Kale knew something eternal. They had found each other, and in each other's touch, the world itself had begun to heal. The frozen heart had melted, the curse had been broken, and the vampire king and the girl who dared to touch him had discovered redemption, courage, and a love that would endure beyond time.